All right, I think we have finished the music section. Really excited to have everyone here today, and I think now is a great time to kick off and get started. Hopefully you were able to use the QR code and click the link and learn about the classes we have upcoming. We have everything from business school prep classes to breaking into jobs and pitch a stock class, as well as breaking into tech biz ops, etc. So make sure to check out our classes and learn from some of our best coaches. First off, want to welcome everyone to tonight's event, Breaking into Investment Banking. This is a really exciting night for us as it is our first ever investment banking event here at Leland. So we're very excited to be able to put this on. We're excited about how many of you are here live and every one of you who will be watching the recording. We're also super excited about the lineup of panelists that we have tonight and excited about the content that they're going to share with us. Before we get started, just want to run through some quick event logistics so we can make sure we're all on the same page. First, make sure to ask your questions directly in the chat. We have a few of us monitoring the chat, so if there's anything that comes up, feel free to drop it in. Panelists, as well as our Leland team members, will be reading through them. Next, be respectful and supportive. There's tons of attendees here, and we just want to make sure we all know we're all rooting and headed towards the same goal. So make sure to be respectful and kind to one another. And then finally, make sure to sign up for Leland. We will be dropping in the chat the Leland sign up link. So make sure to click it and join our platform so you can hear about more of the events we have, as well as free content and access to incredible coaching. In terms of agenda for today, we'll go through welcome and introductions. We'll do a quick Leland overview so you can understand a bit more about who we are. Then we'll do an overview of the investment banking recruiting process. And then the bulk of our meeting will be hearing from our expert panelists. I'm really excited about what they have prepared and what they're going to share with us tonight. And then finally, we'll wrap it up and get you going with landing and securing your dream job offers. First, I want to introduce myself. I am Erica. I'm on the founding team here at Leland, specifically working as the head of experience. So everything I do is focused on delivering an exceptional experience to all of our users, community members, coaches, and really anyone who interacts with our platform. We also are joined by our CEO, John. John, if you want to wave, good to see you here. And Savannah, who runs Coach Ops and events as well. So you'll see their name pop up in the chat as they're answering questions and working with you all. Next, I want to pass the time over to our incredible panelists. As I mentioned, the quality content of tonight's event will come directly from them and their incredible expertise. So Daryl, if you want to get started, and then we can go through the line and then get started with the meeting material, but really excited about hearing about each of your backgrounds.
Yeah, happy to start. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. I went to Brigham Young for undergrad, where I studied finance. After that, went to New York, worked at JP Morgan in their leverage finance group. So I'm happy to share bulge bracket perspective. After that, went and worked in private equity for almost 2 years, and then worked at a PE-backed tech company out of Utah for about 1.5 years, and just started my MBA at Wharton this August.
Hi, everyone. Sandra Yamada. As it says on the slide, I worked at Lincoln International, which is a middle market bank in Chicago. So I can speak to middle market recruiting. I also came from a non-traditional background. I was a biology major at WashU for undergrad. And from banking, I went to private equity, did about 4 years of that with a brief stint in venture capital before starting at HBS.
Awesome.
I can go next. Hey, everyone. My name is Rihanna Shah. I am currently at Morgan Stanley in their tech group in Menlo Park in the Bay Area. I also come from a pretty non-traditional background. I grew up in India, moved to New York when I was 14. Went to Swarthmore College for undergrad, where I studied sociology and educational studies and was running a education technology company. Did that for a couple of years. And then as I left undergrad, I was like, oh, like banking would be kind of interesting. But I'd already graduated at that point. So I ended up doing some venture capital as well as innovation strategy consulting for a couple of years. And then I went back to business school in part to go back into banking or to go into banking, and was at MIT and Harvard doing a MBA and a public policy degree. While I was in business school, I spent the first summer at Bridgewater Associates, so can talk a little bit about the hedge fund recruiting experience as well. And then the second summer ended up interning for Morgan Stanley within their technology investment banking group. Love tech, done a lot of tech in general, but also I just think it's a really, really cool area to be in. And if you're doing banking, feel like tech is like the funnest place to be. And yeah, happy to address any and all questions.
And I'll bring us home. So I'm Julian. I'm originally from Columbia. For undergrad, I was at Harvard, where I studied economics and statistics. And then afterwards, I was at Morgan Stanley in New York, doing consumer and retail investment banking for about 2.5 years. After that, I spent 2.5 years at Netflix, so leaving finance in Los Angeles and Singapore. And I'm currently now getting my MBA at Stanford GSB. Great to meet you all. Looking forward to chatting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you again, each of you, for being here. I'm sure everyone in the audience can +1 the fact that we have an incredibly stacked panel tonight representing several different banks, bulge bracket, middle market, different business schools represented, different grad school programs, undergrad, and also divisions within each of these investment banks. So really excited to learn from each of you. And I know you all have really unique and awesome experience that will benefit everyone in the audience. Now we want to turn it over to each of you on the call. Would love to hear where you're dialing in from. So drop it in the chat and let's see where our members are. Awesome. We got people all over. This is great. Awesome. Awesome. Well, cool to see so much representation. Now, just before we get started with the investment banking portion of tonight's event, which is why you're all here, I just want to give a quick summary of who we are here at Leland. We are a coaching marketplace. We have over 250 education and career coaches. We've raised $5 million from top venture capital firms. We have over 10,000 members in our communities, and we have over 50 top universities and companies represented. My main point, though, that I want to drive home here today is, although Leland as a platform is newer in terms of being online and all of that, our coaches have helped over 3,000 clients with their career and education goals over the past 26 years. So very qualified coaches on the platform who have experience, as you can see here, with different top programs and top companies. And so they're all very equipped to help each of you land your dream jobs. How Leland works: come on, you tell us your goal. So if it's, for example, to work at JP Morgan, like Daryl, or land a private equity job, like several of our panelists, you put that in. Then you can browse coaches who match your budget, your goals, and your background. And then you can book time directly with coaches. So everything that we do here at Leland is helping each of you reach your most ambitious career and educational goals through the power of coaching. We have tons of different offerings. Everything is really revolved around the coaching relationship. So one-on-one coaching, and you can find a coach, like we said, who matches your budget, your background, your goals. So someone who's within your price range, who represents a company you're excited about. In addition, we have community. So we have a community filled with people like each of you who are trying to break into investment banking and other ambitious career paths, and you can learn from them and work with them as you're pursuing your goals. And through our community, we also offer a lot of free content and free events like tonight. And then finally, we have a lot of small group classes for our users. Those are classes taught by our expert coaches to help you get one step closer to your goals. So we had that QR code up at the beginning, and those are a great way to get resume help and interview prep in a small group setting. We want to gift you each coach credit so that you can all experience Leland for yourselves. We've created a $25 coach credit for everyone on this event. So it's just Leland-Investment Banking 25. So use it, write it down, we'll send it out. Please use it with some of the coaches you're going to hear from tonight. They're all excellent, and we'd love for you to be able to put this code to good use and get the prep you need directly from these experts. Now, we'll dive into the investment banking overview. I know that the investment banking process seems pretty daunting from talking to several customers. We hear that all the time. What should they be thinking about? What do the steps look like? A couple things we've jotted down here just from really understanding the process is first doing your research, preparing, understanding the banks, understanding, industries, locations, understanding the industry as a whole. Next is crafting your story and really understanding your why banking, and what motivates you and why you're interested in pursuing this career path. Next is understanding how to connect with investment bankers in the industry and really stand out during the networking process. I've heard from several investment bankers, and we'll talk about it specifically today, that networking really is so much of the process, really shining through relationships and getting to know people and connecting with them. Your resume is super important when it comes to breaking into investment banking, making sure you have work experience that is relevant to the finance industry, showing these companies to get your foot in the door there, that you have technical chops, that you're smart, that you're intelligent, that you're easy to work with, that you know how to talk to clients, etc. So reflecting that in your resume before it is that you can actually land the job itself. Next, with banking, the recruiting interviews are super important. There are both behavioral and technical interviews, and we'll talk about both tonight and make sure you understand really what the behavioral portion looks like, as well as really understanding those more quantitative questions that you will be asked throughout the process. And after talking to several investment bankers, as well as all these coaches today, I'm sure they can attest to the amount of time they spent really preparing for those interviews. And I'm excited to hear the knowledge that they will share to help you each shine during the interview process. And then finally, putting those all together to make sure you can secure a job, secure the offer, and really land the bank that you're most excited about working with. And as you can see from all of our panelists, banking is such an incredible start to your career. It opens jobs that people aspire for their whole lives. And so we really want to make sure you have the knowledge you need to land that job and create the career and educational journey that you're excited about. So with that, I would love each of you audience members to drop which part of the process seems most challenging. I know I just listed a lot, so let's hear from you so our panelists can really make sure to speak to areas that are most nerve-wracking for each of you applicants. Yeah, lots about networking. I'm glad we'll touch on that. Technical interviews, those scare me. Yep, getting to know the right people. This is awesome. Well, great. It sounds like everything that's being dropped in the chat today will be covered throughout the panel. So panelists, take note of these questions and let's dive into the panel. To kick things off, I'd love to have each of you answer this question, and then we'll dive into questions related to each step of the process. Do we want to go Sandra, Daryl, Julian, and then Rihanna, will you bring us home?
Sounds good. So like I mentioned, I actually came from a non-traditional background as a biology major and from a non-core school at Washington University in St. Louis. So what I mean by that is that there weren't large banks coming to recruit, at least when I was in undergrad. That's slowly changed, which is good. But the biggest tip I could offer you is what I did was reach out to alums that either were in their investment banking career at a bank I was interested in, or had been at a bank and left, or even seniors that were older than me that had interned at banks over the summer, and just email them or reach out on LinkedIn and try to get, 15, 30 minutes on their calendar just to learn about banking, get your name in their head, and try to stay top of mind when they start recruiting. So definitely recommend you would reach out, use your network at school.
Awesome.
Yeah, mine is kind of 3 points, but they're all related, and I'll keep it brief. So I would say 1, start early, 2, cast a wide net, and 3, just keep going. So to the point of starting early, you want to start having relationships as early as you can. 1, to maximize the number of people you can talk to over time, but 2, to start cultivating a lot of institutional knowledge and picking up on what are kind of the lingo that people are using, what questions are the bankers asking me, what kinds of deals should I be researching, what kinds of technical things should I be looking into. And on the second point of casting a wide net, try to have some strategy of which firms you want to work for, but be very open to any possibility. There are lots of banks out there between bulge bracket, boutique, elite boutique, regional. There's plenty of investment banking spots. Just apply for as many as you can. Just talk to as many people as you can. And over time, start to narrow that down. But in the beginning, take a broad approach. And then, like I said last, just keep going. It can be a long journey recruiting for banking, a lot of networking chats, but you just need one offer. So be patient and just keep talking to as many people as you can for as long as you can.
Awesome.
Totally agree with what's been said. Start early was exactly what I was going to say. To add to that, one of the things that I would kind of think about is there's tremendous value in reaching out and having a conversation with someone and not actually asking for a job, because that can be actually refreshing to folks that just get a bunch of inbounds asking for jobs all the time. So there's so much value to learning that lingo, developing a relationship, and frankly, understanding better why you want to do banking. I think it's quite common for folks to say, I want to do investment banking, and then after decide why they want to do investment banking. And that's totally normal and reasonable. But the better that you can early on decide why you want to do investment banking and kind of flesh out that story, the more successful you'll be. So big +1 to what's been said so far.
Yeah, these are all really great points. Everyone's talked a lot about sort of how to get your foot in the door, which is awesome. One thing I would say is be prepared, really do your homework. Like there are a lot of times where like candidates might like talk to bankers and they're like, oh, I'm really interested. But it's like, if you're not ready and if you're not prepared, like I can't really pass you on to like the next person, right? It's like, it's hard to coach you as we're also trying to like support you. And so be prepared, do your homework, read about the industries you're interested in, like keep up with what's going on in like the macroeconomic times. Like inflation is connected to capital markets and companies are not being able to raise because of various factors, and all of this stuff fits well together. And so just think about that and really understand it as much as possible. Look at like 400 questions guides. I think these are just some of my like tips of what to do when you're having conversation, like even before you're having conversations. And so once you actually do get a conversation with someone, that's an opportunity to really shine and get your foot through the door and actually like get that next coffee chat or get the next round of interviews.
Great. This has all been exceptional. And I'm excited to double click on a lot of things that each of you talked about tonight. So next question. I think Sandra, you talked about, working for a middle market bank. Several of you are also in bulge bracket banks. I'd love to know, how do you recommend approaching the mini IB options? There's so many to choose from: bulge bracket, middle market, boutique, specific industries, specific cities that might have specialties in different areas, etc. Sandra, do you want to kick us off with answering this question? And then I will pass it over to you, Rihanna.
Yeah, sure. So for me, I really wanted to see a lot of deals and be on small deal teams, working as the sole analyst, to really be able to have that tangible impact on projects I was working on, and feel like I got those reps necessary to potentially move into private equity. I didn't know yet what I wanted to do, but knew that the exposure would be really valuable, just even to my learning. And from the conversations I had in middle market banking, you can cover a lot more deals. You're on, 2 to 3 live deals kind of at any given time, versus maybe in bulge bracket, you're working with a few clients, but the deal flow is not as robust. So that was kind of how I went about it. And then once I'd narrowed down to middle market banking, I wanted to go somewhere where I felt like I was supported. This is apprenticeship. You learn on the job, and the people you work with really make a difference. So I ended up just speaking to different folks at middle market banks that I had heard of, and found a home at Lincoln, and really enjoyed my time there. So I think it is kind of a personal decision on what you want to do, what you want to get out of your banking experience. And then from there, you can think about industry and city as well.
Awesome. Rihanna, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say there's really like tons of, in my opinion, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much where you end up to some extent. That's like maybe a controversial take, but I think it's more about like, do you like the people who you're talking to? And do you actually feel like you spend like 90 to 100 hours with these folks in the office, hanging out with folks? And if you don't feel good in your conversations with them, then like maybe that's not the place that you want to spend the 100-hour weeks. If you're coming in as an analyst, you spend at least 2 years, if not longer, and you don't really want to spend 2 years working with people you hate. So people is sort of my first thing that I would think about when you're looking at this. And then I think the other place of that is like every bank is a little bit different. And even like, although I'm within Morgan Stanley, it's like the tech group kind of is based on the West Coast. And so we kind of can be a little bit different than like larger Morgan Stanleys. Just kind of get to know each bank and its own culture, as well as the culture of the groups that you're interested in and interviewing with as well.
Yeah, this is really incredible insight. I think from what I've heard just from the beginning of this panel, the preliminary research that people do as they're trying to break into banking is so important. Just really understanding your why. And I think having all of these conversations really helps with the story, the narrative you put together. So yeah, great advice, Sandra and Rihanna, and excited to jump to the next question. This question's pretty general. How do you recommend approaching IB networking? I'll double click and say what I really would like to get out of this question is, what are common mistakes you've seen people make in networking? And then what are ways that candidates have really shined to each of you as you've been on the other side of the interview process, evaluating clients and all of that? Julian, do you want to take it away? And then Daryl.
Yeah, absolutely. So many ways to make mistakes and shine. I think the first thing I'd say is on the point of casting a wide net, recognizing that there are going to be people that no matter, you know, what you come prepared with, you may not jive with. And on the other way around, there might be people that you are just really predisposed to jive with and vice versa. So a big part of that numbers game is just, you know, a bit of luck on that. On the mistakes piece, one thing that I frequently saw was a little bit of overconfidence from some individuals who came in saying, I know exactly what I want and I know exactly how investment banking works, and I'm here, you know, to impress in a very maybe traditional way. I think that, at least to me and at least to my colleagues, sometimes came across a bit too strong. And one of my thoughts on the industry and how to approach banking more broadly is recognizing that it's early in our careers, and so being a bit more flexible with, you know, where exactly do you want to specialize, what exactly is your focus necessarily. So kind of having that level of humility usually lands really well. The way in which you shine is by showing a lot of curiosity and saying, hey, I saw, you know, this recently happened. Can you tell me why this made sense or why this didn't make sense? For example, if the person you're speaking with may have recently been on a deal, ask about, you know, what that deal was like, or ask about what why that deal may have even happened. Really showing a curiosity feels like you're going that extra step as opposed to kind of coming in a bit too strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything Julian said. I would say on the mistakes too, a lot of people will reach out and be overconfident. Like Julian said, I think the way to get past that is to show humility and to be prepared. I think you should, you know, say if you have any preference, like I want to work in tech, but you need to be able to back that up with either real experience or real reasons or real industry knowledge. A lot of people go for a certain industry, a certain bulge bracket, certain geography, and they don't have a why behind it. And those conversations usually don't go very well. On the things I've seen work really well, it would be warm intros. So what I mean is, if you want to talk to someone at a certain bank, but you're not directly connected to them, you're going to have a lot higher chance of them responding to you and responding favorably and wanting to help you if you get someone who's already connected to them to introduce you warmly. So it might not be the best strategy to go straight to an MD who's an alumni from your school. You might want to talk to 2 or 3 analysts from your school who currently work there, interned the summer before, have them introduce you up to an associate and kind of work your way up the chain. That's what I've seen work. Although it's a little more time intensive, it's a lot safer, and you'll have a lot more people going to bat for you when the time comes for interviews.
Yeah, that's
a very
incredible.
quick thing I would add that's really funny. During my banking interviews, during my banking recruiting process, people basically said, be a zero, but don't be a negative. Like, it's okay if you make zero impression, but just don't come off like an asshole, like folks are talking about on this call. You're memorable in the wrong ways for that reason, if that happens.
Totally. Sandra, anything you want to add?
I was just going to say, I mean, if you're genuine and you're appreciative of the time that they're giving, everyone is so busy. So even getting them on the phone is a big deal, and just, keep your questions quick, make sure they're thoughtful. Like Rihanna said, you don't have to blow anyone's hair back, but you can leave a positive impression without even, doing too much. So stay humble and appreciative.
Totally. I think this is all really incredible insight. It sounds like putting time into preparing, being genuine, trying to make real and genuine connections, being considerate of people's time, and having your story put together before you go and reach out goes a long way. Next up, how do you help clients craft their stories to be prepared for networking opportunities and interviews? So going off the question we just had, we're talking a lot about like how to approach it. So now you're working with a client, they have a meeting on Friday at a coffee shop in New York with someone from JP Morgan's banking division. How do you help your client put together their story to stand out during that conversation? And then also in interviews as well. But Daryl, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, I think the first principle is just make sure it makes logical sense and has really good whys behind everything that you share. So the people who talk to you want to know that you're making decisions proactively that make sense. So if you had 2 or 3 internships, they want to know why you went to each of those internships, how you thought that would prepare you for banking, and how they all led up to you having a conversation with them. Sometimes this can require a little bit of creative backwards thinking and connecting the dots backwards. You almost never have the full strategic vision when you start on this journey. And so the key is picking out which parts of each experience are relevant to your long-term goal that you're trying to portray, and really amplifying that. So even if only 5% of your internship that you did had anything to do with valuation, you're going to hammer on that point and talk about what you learned about it, what got you excited about it, and how that led you towards investment banking.
Awesome. Sandra, coming from a bit of a non-traditional background that you spoke of, how did you communicate your story throughout your interview process?
Yeah, so I would say bankers love to talk about banking. And so for me, I really kind of hyped up the notion of what I'd heard, that it was kind of a crash course in business. You get a really robust experience and can learn a lot. And I had a lot to learn. So I kind of admitted that, but explained why I wanted to go into business. For me, it was that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial eventually and take my bio background and merge it with business. And I knew that banking would kind of prepare me to really see a ton of different business models and get that exposure. So I think showing you've done your research and why you're interested in their bank or whatever part of the market they play within really helps you craft a story. And I think it's important to remember, you're in college, no one expects you to have your full life plan. But in these coffee chats or interviews, we're really trying to suss out, are you a hard worker, intellectually curious, ready to learn? Do you have the intangibles where, I can coach you, or, you're a team player that will just get the job done? And that's what's most important at the onset. So really showing that you're eager and you've done a little thought about why maybe their bank or program is right for what your goals are.
Yeah. Julian, I see you nodding your head. So I'd love for you to add any additional color or thought you have to this question or story building in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say as important as the why sometimes is also the why not. I think it's very frequent for, let's say you're meeting with someone in a healthcare group and you come in with these 5 reasons why you think healthcare is super, super important and amazing. And somebody could turn to you and say, great, why don't you go work at a healthcare company instead of banking? And if that stumps you, then that's a bit of a red flag. So kind of saying, okay, why does this make sense? And why do the alternatives not make sense? Kind of sussing out what the difference is between banking and everything else really shows that you've really been thoughtful about how you're approaching your next step, and is always really impressive.
Yeah. Rihanna, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I think something that people often forget in banking recruiting is that at the end of the day, like it's really your attitude that counts and matters. And so I think from a crafting your story perspective, it's like what I really like to do is really like helping folks humanize themselves and kind of create their brand. So in my banking pitch, I not only highlighted my professional experience, but I also talked about grit and resilience and attitude, right? Because that's really what, when you're trying to turn comments at like 2 a.m., like that's really what matters at the end of the day.
Mhm.
It's not your like corporate finance experience and interest. And so I think I really want to help folks kind of take both the professional and the personal to really come across as a human and not just as like if you're someone who is like, I was bored to bank, like that's a bit of a red flag. Like it's like maybe you should develop some more interests. And so I think thinking about that and just kind of helping you figure out like how does banking fit into your life and like how can you make a like realistic case to a bank is something that I really like spending time on. And so I feel like, at least for me, two important things that I do with coaching is helping people craft a really great pitch. Like that's super important. Your first like 1 to 2 minutes is extremely important. People are basically making a decision in the first 2 minutes if they're interested in passing you on to the next person. And so super important to do that. And then the second piece of it is how to formulate good questions and how to kind of be present and how to come across as someone who's curious and inquisitive and just like have the right attitude.
Totally. Yeah, big +1 to what each of you said. And I think kind of what I've summarized from all these answers are being thoughtful and preparing and really thinking about that narrative that you want to tell when you're both in coffee chats, but also when you're sitting in that interview seat is super important. Just a quick plug for all of these coaches. Coaching is great to help with that. Not only is it important to prepare your story, but to practice your story and make sure that you feel really comfortable delivering it in a way that comes off really natural, really genuine, and like Rihanna said, very human. So definitely a great place to engage a coach and make sure you feel confident telling that story really in any touch point that you have with bankers and people in the industry in which you're trying to break in. Prior to recruiting for investment banking, how did you gain relevant work experience? I think this question is really important because, several people who are applying for banking roles, internships, they are sophomores in college now. So not a ton of work experience, not a lot to speak to. And I know people get pretty creative with gaining work experience and internships and all of that. Julian, I'd love to hear first from you. How did you get that, first job on your resume so that you stood out to the banks that you're applying?
Yeah, it's so true. There is really such a meme of to get a job in banking, you need to have a job in banking. And unfortunately, that's true for other industries as well. I think for me, you mentioned the word creativity, Erica, and that resonates. So I definitely try to be creative. I basically tried to match together a couple different opportunities that I had in the past. So the first one was I really wanted to demonstrate that I was technically capable and I knew my way around Excel. So the summer before my internship at Morgan Stanley, I was at a think tank in Argentina. And that has nothing to do with finance, but I was coming up with proposals to deal with infrastructure in Buenos Aires. And I managed to use that as a way to say, okay, I know how Excel works. And I know, again, like a little bit of quant. The other side is, okay, the why not piece. So why didn't I want to go back into the think tank world, for example? Is I talked a lot about my experience in Model UN, which again is not a career thing at all, but a little bit of saying, okay, here is my technical background, here is the interpersonal background that I have, and just how much I learned from Model UN of just talking to people, relationship building, all that. And as I thought about what I wanted my career to be, I wanted a job that had both of those elements. And so I was able to kind of in a somewhat creative way say, okay, I've kind of done the components of banking, and I know that I like the components of banking, and kind of try to pitch that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Daryl, anything that you'd like to add to this?
I would say, in addition to being creative, you want to approach the pre-IB internships like you would IB. So it's going to take a lot of networking, most likely. If your school offers any on-campus internship options, I would definitely look to those because usually they don't require much previous experience. And even if they're not directly related to banking, there's always some nugget you could pull out of it even if it is, you got familiar with Excel, or
Mhm.
you saw a business raising money, maybe you went to a startup and it's a tech company, you could try to leverage that into some tech IB role down the line. And so I'd say, again, cast a wide net. Don't be too picky for your first experience, but once you have something, you can really take what the highlights were of that and leverage it for something better as a second experience. And for context, I've seen on average people that I know had about 2.5 internships before their IB internship. That was somewhat relevant and helpful. So try to get 2 or 3 things the summers before or the semesters before you recruit.
Awesome. Sandra, this question is, oh, sorry, here we go. This one is somewhat relevant, but I'd love for you to answer, and then Rihanna, going off what both Julian and Daryl said, but if you have anything to add here, I think it'd be super helpful.
Yeah, so I guess just the first thing we just touched on about internships. A lot of people list what the internship was, kind of what they did, but really powerful resumes kind of show that one analysis you did that mattered, that went somewhere. We like to see cause and effect of your work product. So really highlighting that throughout your resumes is a big deal to make those experiences jump off the page and not look like just check the box, did something for a summer, but wasn't really engaged. And then I would say also leadership. That's really important to highlight. Your students are probably involved in clubs or sports or student-run businesses, whatever it is, that's super important to recruiters to look at, to see if you're engaged and you take action. So I think really highlighting that throughout your resume is important as well. And I would say, are you a team player? We're working long hours with people, and it's client services at the end of the day. So you're all together working for a common cause, and really highlight any of that experience you've had. And then there's kind of the obvious, GPA, where'd you go to school, what else you're involved in, that's important to have on there. But I'd say one other thing that's super fun that helps you stand out is your interests. So these interviews can be dry, you can be doing, a ton a day as a banker. And so it's cool if someone stands out. I had a girl who was interested in cooking, and I just remember her going off on avocado toast and the different balsamic vinaigrettes and, her interest there. And that was pretty memorable for me. So just things like that can also help you jump off the page.
Yeah, that's great insight. Rihanna, anything you'd like to add here? I know you're a recruiter for Morgan Stanley right now, so would love that expertise and insight as well.
I think, honestly, the resume matters, but not that much, which may be a bit of a hot take. I mean, of course, the resume will matter to get you through the door, but at the end of the day, once you are talking to someone, once you have a warm intro, someone may look at your resume and glance at it, make sure it's clear, make sure there's no weird colors, and there's just some basic resume cleanliness stuff that I think is important to make sure it looks really good. And I think in addition to that, it's I agree with everything Sandra said. It's try to have data as much as possible, try to showcase your leadership, your team player abilities, try to sort of put in as much entrepreneurial experience as possible. At the end of the day, when you're in banking, yes, you're thinking about how to really shape. It matters what kind of experience you have in the past, but also it matters how much what's the attitude that you're bringing, and are you able to also run with stuff, or are you just waiting for people to give you comments and for you to execute? So try to kind of really up level sort of what you're talking about in your resume, and try to make it as relevant as possible to whatever industry group you're interested in going into.
Totally. Awesome. Yeah, this has all been really good insight on the resume. It sounds like, getting that experience wherever you can get your foot in, getting quant experience, leadership experience is all super relevant. And yeah, like Daryl said, most bankers who are applying have a couple internships already on their resume. So really leveraging your network and the people around you to get that first opportunity that then will lead to the next and the next. Thank you all for sharing. Next question is, what advice do you have for nailing the why banking and why this bank question? Let's do Sandra and Rihanna on why banking, and then Daryl and Julian can do why this bank.
Sure. So that was actually a big one for me because everyone said you're a biology major and your parents are doctors. Why are you interested in this? And I really had to think about what my end goals were from a first career. And I really just wanted to learn a lot. I wanted to be in a technical kind of problem solving industry and get vast exposure to a ton of different businesses. And so, those are broad statements, but I think they resonate a lot with the people I spoke with and signaled that I was engaged and I was excited and I was eager to work hard. And those are kind of the main things I look for a candidate when they're coming in, because you don't really know what it is until you've done it. And I think the closest you can get to that is just have a ton of conversations with people to demonstrate you really understand what your day-to-day looks like as an analyst and you're ready for the job.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's amazing that why banking is like the first interaction people are going to have with you. And so really having that answer down. Rihanna, take it away.
Yeah, I was gonna add, I think Sandra had really great info. I think around why banking, I'd be sure to frame it in a way that you demonstrate that you really do understand what banking is. I think sometimes people come in and will answer the why banking question without really fully knowing what their job is or what they're going to be expected to do. And so I think come in, like, make it personal for yourself, like try to talk about not only what you're going to get out of your experience, and not only the learning that you'll get, but also what you'll contribute, right? Like, even if you're coming in as an analyst or an associate, like even if you don't have a banking background, like you may have an interest in a specific thing that may be useful, or just try to like brainstorm and think about ways in which you are also going to contribute to the team. And it doesn't just have to be on a like corporate finance level, right? Like it can also be like I'm super social and I love being the like culture carrier, so I'll be like the organizer for all the like analyst happy hours. Like that also is contribution. And so be sure to also kind of highlight what you're going to bring to the bank as well.
Awesome. Daryl and then Julian for the why this bank.
Yeah, so my approach and one I've seen work pretty well is just pick 3 things and then an anecdote for each thing, that either how you found out about it or how it's important to you. So for example, with JP Morgan, one of them was they performed pretty well throughout the financial crisis because they had more conservative balance sheet. And Jamie Dimon, that was his whole MO that he brought in from Citibank before. I had heard that in an interview and I mentioned that. And whenever you talk about Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, people's eyes light up. So try to pick 2 things that are really specific to the bank like that you found on your own, makes it look like you're very proactive. And then the third one, I would always mention the culture. It's really cliche, but that comes from talking to other people at the bank through your networking. So you can say, I spoke to this person, that person, these 6 people, and these 2 aspects of the culture really shone through in our conversations, which seem different from these other banks. And that's why I'm really interested in this bank.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the Jamie Dimon tip is a great one. I think in general, regardless of where you're applying, it's always good to know like what are the things that people at company X always really enjoy talking about. So identifying that is important. I'd go back to I think it was the second question, which is bulge bracket versus boutique, industry, all of those questions. And kind of applying that to the bank that you're interviewing at is one way to be very tangibly thoughtful about the answer. Overall, I think this question is a little unfair. I think by and large, we've all been saying that the banks are, it's more important to be in banking versus, which specific bank. So I don't love this question. But I'd say the 3 things that I'd call out. First is people that you've spoken to. There's tremendous value in speaking to people that you're not interviewing with. It really shows that you've had this longer interest in the company and in the bank. The second thing I'd say is deals, kind of like what Daryl's saying. Any deals that you've seen the bank do recently, say, you thought that was interesting. And the last one is culture. The reason why I put that one last is because it is probably the easiest for it to come across a little fluffy, I guess. And the reason why I say that is because I'm pretty sure that like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, all that, they all have probably the same exact corporate values. And if you say, I really love that, Morgan Stanley cares a lot about putting clients first, I'm pretty sure Goldman Sachs has the same exact like corporate value. And so unless you can back that up with the conversations that you've had that really demonstrate that through examples A, B, and C, I would usually lean against that one, even though it's nice to kind of throw in at the end, because people always like to hear it.
Yeah, I just want to add on that something I forgot to mention. When you network with juniors at the bank, just ask them why they chose that bank. The real answer is that's the offer that they got, but they're not going to say that. They're going to tell you, oh, because JP Morgan does this that no one else does. And like, you can then go validate those things on your own and use those in your own answer.
Totally.
That's a great point.
These have all been really good answers. I think we've focused a lot up until this point on the more qualitative element of the recruiting process, which is huge. From every banker I've talked to, they talk a lot about how the qualitative and behavioral section is weighted very heavily. People who are in the interview seat are evaluating you as a person and what you're going to contribute. So really taking the time to, nail your story, nail your prep, practice mock interview with people, get asked the why this bank, why banking, and, feeling confident in that area just as much as you would with your technical questions. But all that said, I think this is a perfect segue to preparing for the technical, like more quantitative element of the interview. So Rihanna, would love to hear from you first in terms of how do you prepare for this? I know someone mentioned the 400 question guide at the beginning, but would love your tips here, and then we can move on to the other panelists.
I have a 20-month-old who is causing havoc, so you may hear him. So first tip in terms of technical quantitative portion of IB is I'll go back to the 400 questions guide. It was like my Bible. It's available for free if you just Google it. I think that is a great starter, a great starting point to at least get a high level overview of what kind of questions might get asked, both on the behavioral front as well as the quantitative front. So would recommend looking at that as sort of a first stop. Second thing I would recommend is trying to take as many classes as possible. So if you're out of school that has accounting or corporate finance or even economics, would recommend looking at all of those classes at whatever level you're at, whether it's master's or undergrad, because those end up being really, really helpful and just kind of getting a higher level overview. And then I think third piece is try to build a model, try to actually do it, try to work in Excel, try to actually find a place and try to build a 3-statement model. And I think just going through that and experiencing the pain of that, you start to understand a lot of things that might be going on in there. And so I would recommend sort of getting as much hands-on experience as possible. If you can get an internship that has some modeling component beforehand, would recommend thinking about it, looking at it. And you can also kind of try to look at public companies and try to build a DCF. There are certain things you don't really need to have a job for in order to learn. So I would recommend spending as much time as possible on that.
Awesome. Sandra, anything you want to add on preparing for the technical portion of the interview?
Yeah, so fortunately for me, there is a formula to these interviews, and I would say the questions haven't changed much since we went through it. So really, you can nail the accounting ones. You just have to practice those. Frankly, I memorized them. So there's a level of preparation you can do to get through those basic accounting questions. And then I would say kind of the next step would be understanding how banks value businesses, and maybe, the second or third follow-up question, and how you would think about different valuations or different business model characteristics, and really try to challenge yourself in mock interviews or fun settings with friends that are also going through it, or seniors that have interviewed for internships that can kind of ask you some of the same questions. Because I think you can prepare for these and get an idea for how those are going to go. There's not a ton of trick questions, as long as you prepared and can show how you think in those interviews. That's more important than getting all of them right. Awesome. Oh, and I would say the Wall Street Prep Guide was what I used. I think Wall Street Oasis has one as well if you don't use that 400 guide.
Awesome. Julian or Daryl, anything else you'd like to add to this prep question?
I'd just add, there are different resources with different levels of depth for prep. So it might sound overwhelming to jump into the 400 question guide. And like Sandra said, it's probably the same 20 questions get asked in every interview anyway. So if you're just starting out, iBanking FAQ is a really good introduction, high level. Once you nail that, you'll know what the categories are. Then you can use resources like the 400 question guide to go a little deeper. There's also the breaking into Wall Street action plan. So there's basically, if you had an interview come up tomorrow that you weren't ready for, this is like your crash course version. So I would try to order the prep from highest level to deepest and spend time accordingly. Modeling, I think, is helpful. I think at the undergrad level, that's not a portion of the interviews. It will help you understand how things flow, but you probably won't be tested in a modeling test out of undergrad unless things have changed.
Awesome.
They haven't.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm saying they haven't, but I think it's just helpful to get the hands-on experience, but you're not asked to model when you're interviewing for banking.
Awesome. Julian, did you want to add here if there's any other just interview etiquette recommendations in general, or any other best practices for nailing banking interviews, both, either on the qualitative or quantitative side?
Yeah, somebody brought this up earlier, is just the quality of questions that you come in with is actually super important. I think it's really a shame if you kind of crush all the questions, you answer them super well, and then at the end they say, great, any questions for me? And you say none, or, oh, like, what's the job like, or anything like that. That's a pretty big red flag. And so kind of coming up with really thoughtful questions, I think is an underrated part of the interview, because it really is a way to just shine and say, hey, I'm curious. Here's 3 examples through these questions that I'm asking of how curious I am.
Totally. Yeah, Sandra mentioned at the beginning that they're testing your intellectual curiosity. And so through those questions you ask at the end, you can really show that attribute. In the interest of time, I'd love to do this question rapid fire with each of you. Let's go Rihanna, Sandra, Julian, and Daryl with your last bit of advice before we close today's event.
Be curious as you're going into it. Like, you're not just there to like check a box. You are there to genuinely learn about the person you're talking with, as well as learn about banking. And also it's a two-way street, right? Like, while they're interviewing you and thinking about whether or not they want you at their bank, you also want to think about whether or not you want to work at their bank or in banking at all. So just think about it critically. There are lots of cool and interesting things to do, and banking is not the only thing. So just go in with an open mind.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, really try to get to know the people that you're networking with. At the end of the day, like, you're going to be working a ton of hours with them, and they want to just get a beer with you after and feel comfortable and know that you'll have that relationship beyond just coworkers. So I would definitely try to leave that like genuine impression, build relationships. You never know too when you're going to circle back to those folks later in your career.
Awesome.
Yeah, for me, building on what Rihanna was saying, is really pressure testing your own assumptions. And kind of what I mentioned earlier is not taking anything for granted or even being overconfident. Again, I said this earlier, but I think some people start with, I want to do banking, and then figure out the why later. The interview process is really going to pressure test why banking. And so really making sure you pressure test yourself ahead of time, and being open to the answer being no, because that's okay. It's probably better that you learn that before you go through 400 questions and 400 emails. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Daryl, bring us home.
Yeah, I would say be gritty, be hungry, be prepared for rejection, and just keep going. I had a friend who would literally sleep at the bus station because they didn't have money for flights, and were coming from a super non-target school, and they ended up at a really good bank. So there's a lot of stories like that. The bankers will like it. It shows humility, shows that if you're willing to do that, you're probably willing to work 100-hour weeks. So just be gritty and be hungry.
I love it. Thank you all so much for your insight. I've learned so much. I feel like I want to go recruit for investment banking because I feel so inspired. Each of you is so knowledgeable. It's clear that you have thrived in your careers and in your education, and really brought value to your employers and in all the communities in which you've been. I'm so grateful for your time. I know all the audience members, our Leland team, we're so grateful to have you all as coaches and panelists. So a final plug, continue working with these coaches, each of you audience members. Use code Leland investment banking 25 for $25 off. I'm sure it's clear how you can engage with these coaches for interview prep, mock interview prep, nailing your story, talking through networking strategies. The options are endless, and these people are so incredibly prepared to help you. So book time with them, reach out, they book up quick, and make sure to be prepared for when investment banking recruiting starts and kicks off. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining. Make sure to sign up for the Leland community, book time with these coaches, and prepare. We have tons of free resources and guides ready for you. And then most importantly, let's go land an investment banking offer so you can have your dream job and end up like every single one of these panelists here today. So thank you so much, and look forward to working with each of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.